I'm Jeff Brabeck with Our Little Sparrows, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support. All right, dads out there, here we are at our fourth and final episode of hashtag Father's Day Say Their Name 2020. If you've been following us so far, you've been listening to some pretty heavy stuff, and today's episode will not be any less. I'm honored to have with me a special guest, a dad, Chris Wooten. Chris will be sharing his story of loss as well as answering three important questions that I believe most dads would like to hear. So stick around. So Chris Wooten, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you coming on, sir. It's a privilege and an honor.
Thank you for having me. It's great what you're doing, and I feel privileged to be a part of it and help out.
Sweet, man. Awesome. So let's dive right in. First and foremost, this is an open forum for you. Feel free to share whatever you like about your loss story.
My daughter's name is Roya. You can see her picture to the back of me right here. In 2013, so it was January 2013, we found out that we were pregnant, and we had taken not too long, but a little bit of time had passed, and before we got pregnant, and so we kind of took a little bit of a break because I don't know what your experience was, but sometimes you go into this where it's like everything is scheduled, right? And it's like in terms of timing, when women are fertile and everything. So we took a month off heading into our anniversary, and just didn't think about it. And then early January, Zara surprised me with the news, 6 a.m. And very surprised because, again, we kind of weren't focusing on it, and maybe that was the trick. Maybe it was just
right.
We were putting too much pressure on ourselves. So yeah, she told me, and we were super excited, and it was basically a normal pregnancy. First 20 weeks, just regular story, nothing out of the ordinary. And at 20 weeks. Which is when you typically can find out what you're having. We found out we were having a girl. They did the full ultrasound as they do. Everything was normal. They said everything was good, developmentally wise. Like, she looks like a good, healthy baby. And so I was equal parts excited, but kind of terrified, being a first-time dad and thinking of having a daughter. So it was an exciting time. So basically after 20 weeks, everything was normal as far as I knew, nothing to compare it to. Father's Day, actually, I know this series that you're doing is kind of centered around Father's Day. Father's Day was very special to me because it was the first time that I felt Roya's kicks. This was during the time, around that mid, I guess, second to third trimester time where the moms can start feeling, and she had been feeling her, but I hadn't yet. And I remember I put my ear to her belly, and I said, "Do you have a kick for Daddy?" And then she kicked me, and that was the first time that she ever kicked me, that I ever felt her. So that was a special moment for me. That I was considered that my first Father's Day present. Went through the regular motions of a pregnancy, and then at 37 weeks, you know how when you get near the end, you start to go to the doctor more often.
Oh yeah.
I always made it a point to go to every appointment with her, and so
Cool.
Her due date was October 2nd, and September 13th, it was Friday the 13th, we went to what ended up being our last appointment. And I think I kind of had talked to you a little bit about this before, this sort of the backstory. We had what I kind of in retrospect considered like a, I don't know, almost like a preparatory moment. It's hard to explain, but the long and short of it is everything was fine at this appointment, but the nurse took an extra long time to find the heartbeat when normally they would go right to it. And she just kind of chalked it up to, well, sometimes, they kind of move around more as they start to get bigger and everything development. And so
Right.
I had a moment of like 30 seconds where I was kind of feeling a little tense, but then they found the heartbeat and everything was fine. I'm like, okay, all right. That was a little bit of a scare. So, and then Sunday. So this was Friday, and I actually had for whoever's listening, I'm also in the Coast Guard Reserve, so I do my weekend duty. So it was a weekend drill for me, and I was away Saturday and Sunday, and then Sunday evening I came home, and I always would ask whenever I would see Zara at the end of the day, I would always say like, oh, did you do your kick count? How's everything going? Because you're supposed to do that every so often. I think it's like you're supposed to have 10 or 20 kicks in an hour period. So she said, actually, I haven't really been feeling it much today, but she also had been out and about all day. She had been shopping at the mall, and I guess she had just been kind of doing a shopping day. So she kind of was just sort of chalking it up to that. You don't necessarily feel it as much when you're out and about. So I said, okay, well, let's, we kind of sat down and did it, and we weren't feeling anything. And, I mean, obviously, in retrospect, I mean, there's always periods of times where the baby's not super active, right? But this was a little bit concerning, and I went upstairs and I pulled out, we had the What to Expect book, what to expect when you're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I read up on baby's movements and lack of movement. And it did say in there that when you get near the end of the pregnancy, sometimes the movement goes way down because the baby starts running out of room and they're kind of getting themselves ready to maybe be delivered. And we were at just a couple days shy of 38 weeks at this point. So not exactly full term, but 9 months, and
right.
I just kind of, in my head, I just kind of decided that that's what it was. And, my mindset at the time, it's kind of illogical, but it's kind of emotional too, I guess. It's that thing where it's like, if you don't say it, then it's not what it is. If I say, oh, we might've lost the baby, then maybe we'll lose the baby. But if I don't say that, then, it's like, I'm not accepting that reality. And part of it also is it just goes back to that whole, like, you don't ever think it can happen to you until it does. So I think both of us were because in retrospect, I'm like, how could we not have just gone to the hospital right then? What was wrong with us? Right. But in our mindset, I guess that's just kind of where we were. And we went to sleep, and the next morning I asked her, any change, and nope. So then she called the advice line, and of course they just said, come in. But, we needed to be told that, I guess. And I mean, I feel like I was equal parts in denial and in terror at that point. The drive to the hospital was very tense and very quiet. I mean, I felt like for me, it's either we lost this baby or we're gonna have this baby, because based on what I just read, I'm telling myself it's because she's so ready to be born that's why she's not moving. So we're gonna go there and she's gonna be, they're like, oh, she's ready to go, and that's what I'm hoping, right? So at this point, when we get to the hospital, Zara's not even like talking. She's like in her own little sort of shock or whatever, and so we go straight to the delivery department, and I did the talking. I explained to them what was going on, and they immediately took us to a side room, and it was a room where there was another family already in there. It was like a little barricade in the middle, and very quickly, the nurse came in with the Doppler, and again, like I had mentioned, the thing with on Friday was being kind of like a precursor. I mean, right. she tried to find the heartbeat. She even asked her, like, where is it usually? And she knew exactly where. She's like, it's usually like, right here. Went there, nothing. And then she just did a full like belly scan all the way up and down, just all the way up. And it almost in tandem with when she started doing that, I started pacing. I just, I almost feel like a polar bear in the zoo who's like pacing because they're like a caged animal and they don't belong in there, and they start going back and forth. It was almost like that with me, where I was like, it's almost like that fight or flight thing, it's like I had to start moving. I had adrenaline building up. But I think I was also kind of starting to enter into a certain kind of shock. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where like now the writing seems to be on the wall, but I'm still kind of in denial. But I'm like, anyway, I'm just literally just pacing back and forth. Man. And finally, a doctor comes in because to really confirm it, they have to do an ultrasound so they can see. Right? It's not just a matter of hearing. So the doctor comes in, and I mean, it's very scary and very tense because it's like all of a sudden everybody's coming in. Like when you get seated right away, you know that it's important, right? Usually you don't get seated right away, but and I mean, doctors and nurses and they brought the whole machine in, the full ultrasound. So then they do the ultrasound, and I see my baby girl right there, and the doctor goes, "Uh-oh." And then he goes, and then it's almost like he was kind of in shock.
Right.
And then he goes, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm doctor, I don't remember his name. I'm doctor, didn't introduce himself to Zara. And he's like, I'm looking at the baby's heart and there's no heartbeat. And so that was the moment. And I basically just like, I just kind of threw myself to the ground. Like I remember I kind of almost felt like I was collapsing like into the fetal position myself. And, Zara's just, obviously she's just on the bed already. So she didn't really have much option of where to go. And I just remember going into like this, sort of like unreality zone. And at some point I think I was kind of crying, but I was also just kind of like I didn't know where I was sort of. And just kind of, just holding myself in this little ball. And at some point the nurse comes and, shakes my shoulder and she's like, your wife really needs you right now. And I think she said something about like, I know that you're in pain. Like she said, I don't remember exactly what she said, but she said something to acknowledge that, which I think is important. Even to your point, like with what you're doing right now, right? I mean, the whole dad series, I mean, I think it was important to that she acknowledged that. But yeah, as soon as she said that, I was like, you're right. Like she does, I'm recognizing the fact that I need to be there for her. And I go to her, I just like kind of gave her a hug, I kind of grabbed her. And then from that point on to the time that we walked to the room, it was kind of a blur. The next thing I consciously remember is we left the room. We weren't in like an official delivery room. We were just like in a side room, right?
Wow, man.
So we're lined up outside the door, and there's this long hallway. I mean, it almost felt, I don't know, symbolic or something in a way. Like we're about to head down a long road together,
Right.
And where it really hit me is my wife, who's just like, she's just the strongest, smartest, person I know. She's like my rock, right? She helps me keep myself in line and like keep my own head on straight. And we're starting to walk down the hall. She like looks up at me and she's kind of breaking, and she's like, what's happening? And I'm like, I don't know. And I think it's, again, kind of goes back to that, like, you don't want to say what's happening. Like, we don't want to say what's reality here, right?
Right.
But when she said that, it just broke me, because it's like, she's so strong, and she's the one who's usually helping me out and telling me what's going on, right? So we walked down the hall, and then we ended up going to the last room down the hall, and they said they do that typically with like lost parents. They try to get them as far away from the other rooms as possible, just so you have a little extra privacy. And I did hear a good amount of babies being born over the next day, which obviously, like, you can imagine, that's a whole whirlwind of emotions right there too, right?
Yeah.
And then they left us they kind of let us have our moment, and we just sat there sobbing for what felt like an eternity. I felt like I was crying more than her, but I think that probably is just because I was so in shock myself that maybe she was, and I just didn't even know. Like we were just kind of holding each other, basically just letting everything out, just crying. And we had our time. They let us grieve, and at some point they came back in, and then they kind of had to go over options, right? And this is where it gets to the I hate to say, I don't like to say dark side anymore because I kind of off topic, but with everything that's going on right now with Black Lives Matter, I know that's off on a tangent, but I'm trying to say the bad, every side of child loss is bad, right? But what I'm saying is the part that you don't necessarily know about when you don't have it yourself. You still have to deliver the baby. Right. You lose the child, but the child doesn't disappear. The mother has to deliver her baby that she lost. So, and I'm only making a point of that because that's a thing that would come up later in being a father, right? Like people seem to think that the baby just disappeared. So anyway,
I mean, that's the whole taboo side of things, not talking about it. Yeah. I hear you.
So they basically said, we can induce you and you can have this baby in the next day, or you can go home because the baby will still naturally, your body will go into labor eventually within the next week or two. It'll do its thing and it'll go because it's still got to deliver the baby. And I actually said, could we entertain the idea of doing a C-section purely because of my own wife's, like I didn't want her to have to go through the delivery. I just felt like that's terrible for her because I know how delivery is supposed to be so painful and everything. But they said they don't like to do that unless it's absolutely necessary because any surgery does carry some risk.
Sure.
So we just both decided, we're like, let's just have the baby, let's just induce, because we don't want to go back home. We don't want to, and then she's going to walk around and people ask you, oh, is it a boy or girl? When are you due? Right. So let's just go, let's just do it. So they did, they gave her the drugs to induce. And it was a rough night. It took about, 18 to 20 hours or so from then to have the baby. And it was a rough night. Heard a lot of babies being born. Heard the crying, and I remember my wife. She when she disrobed after we decided that we were going to induce. That was a tough moment for me. It started. It really hit me that this was something that was happening to her physically.
Right.
Like, in my head, I was like, I have to be there for my wife. Like, my whole purpose in life right now is to be there for her and support her. And that kind of was my own way of coping as well, right? Like I had my purpose. I just lost my child, but I need to be there for my wife. That gave me that sanity and purpose. And that was it. Like that was my mission, was just be there for her. And then we ended up having the baby, Roya. I mean, she's our daughter, Roya. And the moment of delivery was, I guess maybe it was just shock, but it was kind of peaceful. And by peaceful, I don't mean that it was like we weren't happy. I mean, we were still sad, but it felt like there was this almost like benevolent force that was kind of telling us that it was okay. And again, maybe it was just shock, but it wasn't like I thought it would be. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm not saying it's going to be different for everybody, obviously. But that was our experience. And I know for the scope of what we're talking about here, there's more to tell, obviously, but the main point was we had our baby. And as you said, I mean, that's to me why I'm a father. I saw her, I held her, I put her in the ground. That's the thing. I like, if you want to question if I'm a dad, I put my daughter in the ground. So So I'm a dad. As you say, like, it's not the kind of terms of a dad that is you would normally think or want it to be, but yeah, absolutely. I'm a father, and you know, the one thing I wanted to say, and then I'll let you get into I know you've got some questions for me. When we were getting ready to leave, you know, without our baby, I remember seeing people coming out with balloons. Congratulations. A mama was coming out carrying her newborn baby, and she was so happy. And I didn't have any like ill will or disdain towards them. So I'm not trying to go there, but I became very conscientious of the fact that people die at a hospital. Not even necessarily just what just happened with us, but people go there and die. So it made me think just about my own, it really shifted my perception of things that I might celebrate. It's just a way of looking at life through the lens of that there are other people that might not be going through the happiness you're going through. And like I said, I didn't have any disdain for that woman being happy, but when we left the hospital with our future children that did live, it was very personal and kind of subdued and quiet. You know, it wasn't like a big elaborate show. And again, I'm not saying that to judge anybody that does do that. I just think that when you go through something like this, it kind of shifts your perception a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's a whole different perspective for sure. Yeah.
But that's in a nutshell. That's my story of Roya. This is a drawing of her. It's, you know, a person who does this kind of thing, did it for my wife for free. So it was really nice. It's kind of just a moment of her holding her. So we keep her in our hearts here at our house. She's a part of our family. She's a part of our nightly prayers. So that's my story of Roya.
That's beautiful, Chris.
Thank you.
You've got a beautiful story, Chris. And I know we talked a couple weeks ago, and you shared some stuff with me, and that came up obviously again in telling your story. And first off, man, thank you so much. Thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you for putting your heart on the table. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing Roya with all of us. I can't even express more than that how grateful I am, and honored, I think is a good word, and privileged to be a part of the audience, to be able to listen to that, because that takes a lot out of, I know for me, it takes a lot out of me to share our story. I'm sure it takes a lot out of you.
It's you know, like you said, it's an honor to share the story, and you know, I think we were talking offline before, and I was telling you how the memory of her is kind of all I have. So I'm always glad to share her and say her name, and you know, let people know that she's still a part of our lives here, and she's going to be a part of our family forever. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me come on here and share my story.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few things that stood out to me that I thought were very powerful. Let's see if I could recall them. I wasn't making cryptic hand notes on a scratch pad, but there was a few things, man. Just like let me kind of pull them out off the top of my head. Talking about being pulled between two different realities. The way you express that, you know, on the way to the hospital, and it's like, man, we are expecting to have a baby 39 weeks, right? 38 weeks, right? Yeah. We're expecting to have a baby, and it's going to be a normal birth, and everything's going to be fine. And now we're in this new reality, right?
Right.
So, and it's a 180, right? You don't have a choice. You're forced to make this change. So that stood out to me. I thought that probably speaks volumes with a lot of us. So I wanted to bring that up. I also loved that, again, you were so expressive and so vividly clear with your story that I think this is going to reach a lot of guys on a level that maybe they didn't even realize. and bring some things up for from their memory for them, which I think is great. That's what this is all about. The other thing that you mentioned was that the two different personalities. Whether you're married or you're in a partnership, I mean, you're in this relationship with another human being, right? With Zara. I had a friend Zoya, so I keep on thinking of her. But awesome. Anyhow, with Zara, yeah. And I love how you expressed that Zara went into her mode, and you went into yours, right? So you were very aware. In the moment and present, which I think that's amazing, and I think that's part of the whole. This is not what we expected, but we're embracing it, and we're going with whatever comes next, right? Because you don't have a choice. Yeah. I mean, reality is you don't have a choice. You do. You could have refused and said, "I'm not going to do this. I'm out of here." Whatever, right?
But Zara can't refuse.
But Zara can't refuse.
That's where right. And sorry to interrupt. I mean, that's one of the things, right? Is the mother has to give birth, and I think I said this in the story.
Yeah.
But she has to give birth to the baby that she lost.
Right.
Whatever I'm going through, physically nothing happens to me. She had to come home and recover, and her recovery was tough. Because she's, the emotions makes it,
Well, it's everything, right? Yeah. It's the whole package.
And that became part of my. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the mind, the heart, and the body, right?
Yeah.
All three things are fighting for their moment to go through the trauma. Right. All three of those parts of you are I mean, there's the five senses, but those three parts of you they're not in harmony. Right. They never are.
That's an eloquent way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, just the way that you were aware at the hospital, and you knew that Zara was in her moment for her character. Yeah. She was in protection mode, and she was shut down to that. She just made it very simple. We're just doing this. I'm sure there was more to it than that, but the fact that you were aware. The other part that stood out to me was when the nurse came to you, and her acknowledging that you as the father are suffering. I think is key. I think there's a lot of room in our healthcare system, in our hospitals, for more humanizing connections, between the staff and the patients. And we definitely experienced a very personal experience. It's a very personal thing we're going through, right? It's personal on both ends of the spectrum, whether you go home successfully, whatever successfully is, and happy with a baby, and you got all the balloons and all the trappings, right, of that, or you're on the other end where you don't get to go home with your baby. You go home without your baby, right? And regardless, I love it that the nurse embraced you as a father that has also lost the child, but that she also asked you to come alongside her and help her support Zara.
Right. Well, she had to bring back in reality. Like you said, because there is a reality, right? Like whether you want to embrace it or not, there's a new reality for me that just came in that instant, and she kind of pulled me back into it, and
to no fault of you at all.
Right.
I don't think that's even part of plays into it.
But
just the fact that she acknowledged it.
Right. Yeah. And but it was a blessing also that she did that, because that became a big part of my grief recovery, was taking care of her too. I said, it just, that had to become my focus, was helping her get through to whatever extent I could. I didn't have to deliver Arroyo. But yeah, for my own personal sanity, that became a big part of it, was okay, I'm focused on my wife now. That's all. That's everything.
Mhm.
The whole world is her. I have to help her get through this.
Yeah. The other thing I remember in you telling your story is the walk down that long hallway, and it just Zara just flat out saying, "What is happening?" Right? I mean, for us, it happened. We got pre-diagnosed at 20 weeks. So we already, I mean, we went through initial numbness, confusion, just not knowing what to think, what to feel, how to react, what to do next, other than just follow along with whatever the professionals are telling you needs to happen next, right? And then it was a whole nother set of things once we, at 33 weeks when Olivia was ready to be born and we went to the hospital, then it was all about, what do those professionals want you to do? Once you're at the hospital, and what choices do you have to make, because they're coming at you not only with what needs to happen next, but questions. You can do A or B, and depending on your answer, this is what is going to happen, right? And it's just all this new experience that you don't have a clue what to do with, nor can you expect what's going to come next to some degree or another, except to just, answer the questions the best you can as they're coming at you. But for her to say that what is happening right now, that just really hits the nail on the head, that this is a shock to the system. This is a trauma to the brain and the heart, and all the hopes and dreams and expectations and everything that you hoped for and wanted for Roya just changed in a moment. And I can associate with you guys being in that room, and I can associate with you hearing other babies being born. It broke my heart hearing you talk about that, because I know, and the chime of the bell every time an angel, every time a baby is born, type thing. Right. For us, for us at Sutter, that's what we heard, in addition to people in the rooms next to us, with their babies and their babies crying. And
then you kind of feel like a jerk for feeling resentful for them having a baby, because I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be happy, in a vacuum. Of course, it's great. I'm happy that they're having a healthy baby, but at the same time, we're human, and you feel how you feel. I mean, of course, you're going to be hurt. Why do you get to take your baby home? Right. Why do you get to have your baby be born crying, and I'm over here in misery?
Yeah.
But
I feel you, man.
That's life.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, those are the things that stood out. I'm sure there's more. There'll be more as I go home and go to bed tonight, and I'll just be like, man, because you were just really descriptive, and I really appreciate.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you putting that out there. I did have a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
A couple of questions. I think I want to kind of switch gears to more along the lines of like, okay, after the hospital, you go home, right. People are gonna hit you up. It's like either people that don't know that what happened and Roy is gone, or people that do know, right? You get it in different directions, but
yeah, absolutely.
There's the relationship that you have at home with your family, with your wife, Zara, and no other kids at the time, just you and Zara.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, it's easy to say I am dad, I am father. Like you said earlier, I buried my daughter. Like I claim it. Like that's it.
Exactly.
Right. And I think sometimes there can be, men can say, okay, I'm okay between, my wife and maybe even my immediate family, and them calling me dad and talking to me about my daughter or my son, right? But outside of that, we have the sociological factor, right? It's like, how do you embrace being called dad? Some men struggle with being called dad when they lose a baby and they don't have a baby to take home from the hospital. And it's hard to talk in those circles, right? So it's like the birth of that baby was torn away from them. It totally changed for them. So I'm just curious. From your perspective, from your experience with Roya, tell us how you felt after you left that hospital about being called dad after losing her.
That's an interesting question. Honestly, at the outset, I didn't think about that. It For me, the shock factor was extreme. The grief was extreme. I remember I would break down every night before bed. A lot of disbelieving it. I remember at one point I was sobbing in bed and I said to Zara, I said, I can't let her go. And I remember in that moment, I just felt like I'm never going to be over this. Like I thought every night for the rest of my life, I'm going to be sobbing myself to sleep because the pain is, it's at a level that, I mean, like you just can't imagine it unless it happens to you. It's not supposed to happen. I think that's part of it. We're not supposed to bury our own kids. So for me, yeah, it was very raw. There's just a lot of crying, a lot of emotional breaking down. So at the outset, I really wasn't even thinking about that. I think in terms of what you're asking about, though, kind of more down the line, what started to happen is I went back to work. People that I knew that were expecting that. There's actually one person in particular who was expecting a baby right around the same time, and it was also a girl. And I remember seeing him, and not immediately, but a few months down the line, he brought up his daughter and just like about having to go pick her up. And this is the first time that it even come up. And I remember I just had hate in my heart, like anger and hate, when he said that. I mean, it's almost like it's as strong as you're sad, as high your level of grief is, right? Is how high your level of potential anger can be. And he didn't do anything wrong. But from my point of view, this was kind of my first interaction with him after a long time. And he wasn't even talking to me. He was talking to somebody else, but he just brought up his daughter, who would have been about the same age as mine.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think where I'm getting at with this is that I did consider myself a dad, but it wasn't the same. And actually, I watched your last episode where you were talking about the things that go along with being a dad, right? You were talking about like how you don't get, or like in your case, you had 5 hours. Like in my case, I didn't have any time with her alive. The traditional dads, they have story after story after story, right? Every day they got another story with their kids. I didn't have that. So I was a little bit resentful of him having this story of picking up his daughter. But for me, the point being that, yes, I absolutely considered myself a dad. I think the struggle comes in, do other people see me as that? At the time, honestly, I didn't really care. I was just grieving. And also the other part of it is Zara got pregnant again January. So I think we talked about this offline also, but our next baby, who's my son Amir, who's 5 now, she got pregnant with him almost the same time of the year. So his due date was well, she was born a little bit early, obviously, but her due date was October 2nd. But the date of when she was actually born, his due date was September 12th, which is just 5 days short of hers was September 17th. He was induced. They do that sometimes when you have a loss. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. But what I was my point being that because Zara was pregnant with our next child as well, it's kind of a unique situation in terms of being a father, because I don't have my daughter, right? That you know, like as you mentioned, like I don't have the stories that happen every day with having a kid, but I have this baby right here. And of course, your next baby does not replace the baby you lost. We know that as lost parents, but that's my child too, and he also deserves my love, and I'm his father too. So that's the very long-winded answer to your question. That's kind of where I am in terms of me being a father.
No, I think that's good. I like the different perspective. It's a perspective of I am the father, but it's still, you know, I had these moments where I get angry or I get pissed because someone else is talking about their normalcy with their child, and I don't get that.
Yeah. For me personally, it wasn't about people, whether they called me dad or not. that's my daughter. And I know it's kind of the same thing, but like part of why I was sad that Roya didn't get to have a life. Like, right? Like you're sad because you have lost something, right? You've lost something.
Yeah.
The worst thing that you could possibly lose, you've lost. But also for me, I was sad that she didn't have a life. She didn't have that experience of whatever that experience was with his baby. And that's my daughter. So that, in a roundabout way, I guess what I'm saying is that defined my identity. Yeah, I'm her dad, but more importantly, she's my daughter. And I'm supposed to be there. Like, daddies are supposed to protect their little girls, right? And I didn't do that. Now I know that's not logical to say that, but that's kind of that's kind of the perception.
There's no right or wrong. I mean, that's
Right.
something else we've learned, as we move along. All right, cool. I have another question for you. I'm gonna hit you up with number 2. So let's talk about that first Father's Day. I know Amir was in Mama's belly, and he was on the way. So tell me a little bit about the celebrating of Father's Day, knowing that you're now father not only to Roya, but also to the up and coming Amir, right? So any thoughts, any specific emotions or thoughts that were going through your head in celebrating that first Father's Day?
Honestly, I've thought about it since we've talked about it before. I don't have a very strong recollection of that Father's Day. We probably went to the cemetery. That's kind of become our tradition. Usually, Mother's and Father's Day, usually we go to the cemetery. But like you said, she was pregnant with Amir. There was no celebration. Long and short of it, there was no celebration. Not in the sense that when we talk about celebrating Father's Day.
Yeah.
Zara might have made me, and she probably made me a nice breakfast, but like I said, I don't really remember. We probably went to the cemetery.
All right, so the third question I had for you was if you had one word of wisdom to pass on to a new father that's grieving the loss of their baby or babies, what would it be, and why is that important to you?
I probably just holding on to the memory. For me, it's like, I think I said this even in the story, like my memory of her is all I have. The short time that I had and the time leading up to her. So I would say hold on to that and soak in as much as you can at the beginning, even in the really hard times. Like I'm talking even at the hospital, baby's born, you're seeing her there, she's gone, but soak all that up. Even though it hurts, hold her, take pictures, because one day you're gonna look back on that and you're gonna be glad that you have those memories. And you never get over losing your child, right? We know that, but you adjust and you go back to where you can still live your life. And I think that it's an important part of the process, is just taking it all in, the experience, and embracing that memory, because people are going to forget. That's the sad truth. Is I always say people move on a lot sooner than you do, and they see you with your next kids, and they think that everything's good, and they don't see me on September 16th every year. Breaking down because that's the anniversary of when we found out that we lost her. They don't see all that, but those triggers are still there. They come more far and few between, but they're always there. So, but yeah, I just think hold on to those memories, because at the end of the day, it's going to be you and your significant other who are going to be the ones holding on to them, and it's what you have is the memory, and that's how we keep her alive here in our house, is keeping her in our memory and our prayers.
Yeah. No, it's great. I love it, man. Just remember it all. Hold your baby if you can, and take pictures, to preserve those memories. That's beautiful, man. That's awesome. Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough, my friend. You've got a beautiful story, and the way that you tell it is so detailed and so eloquent. It really expresses who you are as a person, and your heart, and your love for your daughter. So I can't thank you enough for doing that.
I did have one last thing I wanted to do with you. It's called a lightning round. This maybe it'll allow people to get to know you a little better. I don't know. We'll see. But real quick, lightning round. Let's go into it.
All right.
So
I'm nervous.
This is totally off topic, of course. So, hobby, yes or no?
Like, do I have a hobby?
Yeah. So what is it? What is your
okay. I never heard it quite framed that way.
Just lightning. Quick.
I like to reading, painting. I have a podcast myself, so kind of just working towards the podcast, and just staying up on current events and playing with my kids, of course. Okay, very cool. Weirdest tick or pet peeve? Ooh, probably like bad driving. Fortunately with the pandemic, I've not been doing a lot of driving, which is kind of nice, but I tend to get really pissed off at people, people cutting me off and well, it's also a safety thing too, right? Like I think it's even gotten more enhanced since having kids, because I don't like people putting my kids in potential danger. So when I see people do really crazy stuff, I get some road rage and I start yelling, and I think I annoy Zara, but I think my intentions are I'm well intentioned, but I need to work on the anger a little bit there. But. All right, cool. So you never drive wildly. You're always the conservative driver. Is that what I'm hearing? I like to think so. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Right. Perspective. Which is part of why I get so. I have to get outwardly frustrated in the car to keep myself from going up and running up and flipping the guy off or cutting the guy off. I got to keep it inside. So I have to take it out on Zara so I don't get us into an accident. So. Oh, okay. So prefer books or movies? I go back and forth. I probably movies this year. I think again with the pandemic has really shifted my lifestyle. I know it's weird, but just being at home all the time. Yeah, I've been binge watching a lot of Netflix, not reading as much as I used to, but I used to read a lot more. I still read a little bit. I'm actually reading a book on how to do a podcast right now. There you go. But I think in general, I actually do like I like books because I like to I like to be able to sit back, drink my coffee, and relax. And so what's the last book you've read? Obviously, you told me, but the book on podcasting, and then let's see, it's been a while. I was reading a book by Michael Crichton. I can't even remember what it was called. Oh man, you are putting me on the spot, man. Jeez. That's okay. What did you binge watch on Netflix? I want to know now. I've been binge watching. I first watched all of. Don't tell me it's Tiger King. No, I haven't watched that yet. Neither have I. Just Better Call Saul, and then I've been watching Breaking Bad. Okay. I read a lot of Stephen King. I don't, again, like I said, my last few months has been kind of a blur, just in terms of my routine. But I read a lot of Stephen King. I like science fiction and horror. Very cool. Stuff like that. Very cool. Okay, so we'll end with that. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, I know you have your podcast. Can you share with us how to find your podcast and what's the best way to get a hold of you if someone wants to connect with you? Wow. Okay. That's also putting me on the spot because I have. So I have. Yeah, like I said, I have my podcast, anchor.fm/10th Man. Okay. You can find me there. You can also find I have a Facebook page, just 10th Man Podcast. Those are probably the two. Facebook is probably the best direct way. Cool. I also have, I actually have a voicemail line. If you want to leave me an angry voicemail or anything like that, I won't pick up. It'll go straight to voicemail, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Maybe put it in the description. I don't know. I say fine. It so rarely. It's 10th go. The numbers are numerically 10th go, but I don't. It's I forget. It's 783. I don't know. So yeah, I should. It's my first time being interviewed regarding the podcast. That's all good. I need to. These are the things I need to work on, the self promotion, right? It's all good. I just figure if you have the podcast, might as well share about it. Yeah. So anchor.fm/10th man, and then just 10th man podcast on Facebook, or just my name, like Chris Wooten.
Okay.
And
give us a real quick 30 second synopsis or breakdown. What is the 10th man? What's the purpose behind your podcast?
Okay, so the 10th man, if you've heard of it, the 10th man rule is where if 9 people agree with something, some kind of group, think, it's the responsibility of the 10th person to disagree. And that doesn't mean that you just blindly say like, nope, that's not true and I don't believe it. It just means it's basically like shorthand for research, right? Like don't just assume that because the masses believe something that means that it's true. Sometimes it is true, but you need to double check it. And I think in this age of social media, like bad information gets circulated so easily, and people will see a meme or some doctored photo from news that actually isn't what it said, and they'll spread it around, and then it spreads like a wildfire, and all of a sudden people believe it. So that's just, for me, I just look at it as like a sort of like a fact check in a way, and just exploring topics that aren't necessarily readily explored. Actually, even child loss kind of fits into that mold too. So yeah, just kind of exploring like taboo topics and things that maybe people think one way on, but maybe they could shift their thinking on a little bit. So it's fun.
Awesome.
It's just, it's almost like I call it therapy into a mic. So even if nobody's listening, it's fun just to do
That's
it.
a good tagline, therapy into a mic.
Yeah, true.
All right. Well, check Chris Wooten out on his 10th Man podcast. Chris, thank you so much. Again, from my heart to your family, we love you guys, and thank you so much for sharing Roya with us.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely. You have a good night.
You too, man.
All right. Take care.